Today, I'm here with Greg Jamieson from Jamieson Fisher, solicitors and accountants. Good morning, Greg.
Morning, Brian.
Our subject today is underquoting. It's on every agent's lips. Fair trading is out fining at the moment. So what is underquoting?
Okay, Brian, one of the things I find about underquoting is that the agents are overthinking it, overcomplicating it and reading too much into it. A quite simple thing is that the federal court had a case looking at the Australian consumer law, and there's 3 points we need to get through agents' head about underquoting. Firstly, when the agent substantiates their selling price and puts their opinion on the agency agreement, they're not to quote anything below that estimate. That's just not negotiable. Secondly, if a genuine offer with a contract is received and it is above the agent's opinion, then the agent can no longer quote anything below that price which has been rejected by the vendor. Further, if the owner is adamant they won't sell for a price which is higher than the agent's estimated opinion, then the agent cannot quote anything below that price. And so they're the 3 things that agents need to keep in their mind.
So let's ask some questions around that I get asked a lot. The first one, if I had offers lower than my estimate, so let's say my estimate's $1 million and all my offers are at $950, am I allowed to inform the buyers that my estimate is $1 million but all interest is around the $950?
No. It's quite simple, is that at the end of the day, the agent still cannot quote anything below their estimate, nothing below. They can't turn around and say the market is telling us $950. They still cannot quote below that $1 million mark if that's their true estimate.
So what you're really saying is that if the market is saying $950 and the agent sees that it's $950, they need to change their estimate to $950.
So the reason is now that what the agent has to do is write to their vendor and say, due to these market conditions, now that could be a piston building report has been done on the property and it's found that there's some quality issues, there may be some termites, and as a result the price is no longer $1 million. So the agent now writes to the vendor and says, based on these circumstances, I'm revising my agent's opinion of estimate of price to $900 to $990. Now they can now requote within that range.
And the estimate can only be 10% from the lowest figure to the highest figure.
So 1 million to 1.1. Recently I saw an agent who had an inspection from Fair Trading and they had on their agency agreement 1 to 1.25 and they received an $1,100 on the spot fine. Very simple, 10%, no more.
We had one last week where they put $950 to $1,050,000 and it was $5,000 over. It should be $950 to $1,045,000 and Fair Trading said that's over. It's that black and white.
Very simple.
And your second point, Greg, about buyers and offers and what you can quote after you receive an offer.
Okay, so in a situation where we've got the agent's opinion as 1 to 1.1, a prospective purchaser puts it in writing and says, I make an offer of 1.2 million, or they turn up with a contract signed with a cheque for $120,000 and the vendor says, no, I think I'll go to auction, I'm rejecting that offer. Unfortunately for the agent, that has now moved the bar and he can't quote anything below the 1.2. Notwithstanding that you may well, as an agent, say to the prospective purchaser, your offer's not rejected, it's quite acceptable, but the vendor still wants to go to auction.
They would still have to move their quoting?
Yes.
Even though it's not rejected?
Because you have to look at what the federal court said in their decision, and the federal court basically said if an offer is rejected, even though it might be acceptable, if the offer is in writing and it is higher and it is not accepted on the same terms and conditions of the contract, then the agent has to move what they're saying to people.
Now I'm an agent, so I heard one thing there. Same terms and conditions. So if it wasn't on the same terms and conditions, you reject it on the terms and conditions, and isn't timing part of the terms and condition?
Very much so. So we might have a prospective purchaser walks in and is going to auction and says, look, I'll pay 1.2 million for this property that you've got on between 1 and 1.1, but I want a 6-month delayed settlement. or I want to reduce the deposit to 1%. They're not on the same terms and conditions as the property is currently being marketed for. So that, if that offer is rejected, that doesn't move the price.
What happens if the owner says, look, I'm happy with that price, but I just want it to go to auction. The market's hot. I want to see what the market's going to pay. I want competition.
That's a fair point, but again, we can't get around what the court has made in their decisions. And so, because the court has placed that, it's not arbitrary for me to say, it's not arbitrary for fair trading to say. These are precedents that have been set in Australia, and we're stuck with them.
Well, I think the big question here is that we get all the time, a verbal offer. You've mentioned contract, you've mentioned in writing, a verbal offer. Is that an offer that I have to consider?
At law, a verbal offer is an offer. It's whether it's accepted or not. Now, we know that under the Property Stock and Business Agents Act that if a prospective purchaser makes an offer, the agent has to pass it on in writing. Now, that offer doesn't have to be in writing or on the contract. However, Fair Trading have then gone one step further in a lot of their guidelines. Though an offer is verbal, for them to change pricing, then they require that to be also associated with having received a contract. And that seems to be the triggering point for fair trading as to what's really a valid offer, is the receiving of a contract. Not whether they actually fill out the contract and sign it, but actually having requested a contract.
So an offer is an offer, but fair trading looking at it as when they request a contract is when you have to take it more seriously. But the agent can qualify the offer.
Of course.
And if they qualify the offer and they haven't seen the contract, they haven't done their pest and building, they haven't done their searches, their solicitor hasn't seen the contract at all, I mean, you take that to a vendor and the vendor says, well, I don't consider that to be a real offer to me.
That is a very valid point, Brian, and part of an agent's duty, and what a lot of people forget, is an agent is to find a buyer who is ready, willing and able. And if somebody walks in and says, I'll pay 1.2, are they ready, willing and able? Because again, they haven't qualified. Do they have finance? Have they seen the contract? Do they have a solicitor? Have they sold their own property? Those are the sorts of things that a good quality agent will do to verify whether that offer is a genuine offer.
The back-end pricing that you have on your website, what can you do there?
Okay, so we know there are a number of ranges at the back ends, but what happens is the agent can only put it within that range that is their true estimate. So if their true estimate is $850 to $930, and if that goes over a number of ranges, as long as those ranges fall within that $850 to $930. But something agents need to be clearly aware of is fair trading are a wake-up to the back-end systems and can go to the providers and get this information where it's tracking all of the changes and what the agent has actually put it on for. So if you now have your $850 to $930 range, and that's your estimate on your agency agreement, but you put it on a back-end range starting at $750, they've got you on toast.
So if I'm an agent, I'm thinking of the owner $9 to $990, I'd probably be better to be putting it at $890 or $899 to whatever 10% higher is.
As long as you can substantiate that pricing range.
I can substantiate a $1,000 change, yeah, okay, that's fine. So I think that's great for the agents to understand. And the next point is one that we talk about a lot when we do CPD, but a lot of agents are finding it very, very difficult, and that is the written record. Open for inspection's fine, callbacks are fine, they put it all down there, but it's that wonderful mobile phone driving in the car and they say, how can I write down all the information I'm supposed to?
I know this is something we've discussed with you before, Brian, and I think the best solution is what we talked about, is that when you're taking that call on the mobile, to say that we're happy to give out a price on this property, however our office policy is that we must receive it by email. Here's my email address. Then the inquiry comes in, you've got a written record. It also gives you the ability to update your data. It also then flushes out any of the tyre kickers and your competitors. That's probably the easiest way to do it, because you have to have a record of the price that you gave out, the property, and the time that the price was given. Now, by doing that by email, that's all there held easily in the records for the agent.
I'm going to have to take the agent's point of view here. You know, I'm going to lose prospective vendors. So they ring in, want to know these sort of things, and I'm sure I want the name and number, but it's something that I know some agents are doing it, and I find it very difficult. People are getting very upset with them, and because other agents are giving the figure and not asking for any of that.
People ask, look, there's no right or wrong answer, but the requirement is if I take a call on my mobile, I then have to immediately record who I spoke to, the time, the date, and
Address of the property.
And you can't do that if you're in the car. So these are the sorts of things that then leaves the agent exposed to potential complaints later on down the track. He told me that the price, bidding had started at $800 on this $1 million property. However, if it is in an email, you then have a written record. You also then have a situation, if you can show that that's your office policy, that all pricing is only given in writing by email from your office, then it shuts down any potential complaints to say the agent verbally told me.
I'm hearing in the back of my head all these agents watching us right now and saying this is just not practical, Greg.
One of the problems the industry has is that the Property Stock and Business Agents Act is not necessarily a commercial piece of legislation, and there are a lot of hindrances and red tape placed on business practices that agents have to comply with. And unfortunately, all we can do is provide potential solutions. If the agent chooses not to do it or go down that path, and that's a matter for them. But we can only give, some suggestions.
Risk and reward is what we're talking about. If you want to take the risk, and you may get a reward, or you may not get a reward if fair trading come in.
The agent walks in and fair trading walks into the agent's office and says there's no record and we've had a number of complaints about your office. We're going to prosecute you. Now that's a matter for the agent, and particularly for the licensee in charge as to what supervision they've put in place to ensure these procedures are in place to record these types of details.
So if that happens, first phone call should be to you, is that correct?
Of course.
Yes, I agree. Greg, thank you very much today. That was very informative, and I'm sure all our agents are going to certainly enjoy watching this.
Thanks, Brian.